everyone, this is Isaiah from Trellis. Welcome to the hard truth about B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah, like I said, from Trellis. And Tim, I'll let you take it away.
Sure, I'm Timothy Peterson. I work closely with Isaiah at Trellis, and I work in both B2B and B2C e-commerce, among many other things.
Awesome. Before I welcome our awesome guests, who I'm very excited to talk to, we are very fortunate to have an awesome sponsor, company that we've worked with for years now. Punch Out To Go is now our sponsor, official sponsor of the podcast. And they're a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. So what Punch Out To Go is an iPaaS technology that seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. With their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities for Punch Out catalogs, electronic purchase orders, e-invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents in order to accelerate business results. So quite a mouthful to say what they do, but to really simplify it, they essentially automate a lot of the back office processes and automate a lot of what you want to be doing with e-commerce with all of the customers' kind of procurement and ERP solutions, so that you can really automate the purchasing process a lot more than what you would normally do if you just had just a standalone e-commerce website. So great. They're a great solution, and we hope that you check them out for your business, your B2B business. So without further ado, Aaron Sheehan is our guest from Weidenhammer. Aaron, we kind of go back quite a bit of ways. I think actually we've been in touch for a few years now, and you're the managing director at Weidenhammer, but I'll let you take it away with a better introduction for yourself. That's
sure.
My basic intro.
Thanks, Isaiah, and Timothy, I appreciate it. So yeah, I'm the managing director of Weidenhammer's e-commerce practice. Weidenhammer is a 43-year-old IT company out of the greater Pennsylvania, the Philly area, and we've got a number of business units that we have around Microsoft. We're Microsoft Gold partner, Cisco partner. We have other lines of business, but I get the privilege of running the e-commerce one, which has mostly been in the Magento space, although recently now is in the BigCommerce space as well. And that includes digital marketing and SEO, creative consulting, and the whole shebang. And Weidenhammer historically, as a result of its location just outside of Philly, has had partnerships with a lot of manufacturing and B2B companies in Southeast Pennsylvania, which has been a big hub of manufacturing for decades and decades. And so we've gotten to work with a lot of larger organizations. And going back, I've been in the e-commerce space for a little over 5, maybe going on close to 6 years, and have spent a lot of time just through virtue of working in the Magento space, spent a lot of time working with B2B companies that are looking to add a digital channel to their existing channel map. So definitely excited to talk about this because it's a hot topic now. It was a hot topic 3 years ago, and it's just getting hotter. And I think especially as everybody is forced to work from home and figure out how to advertise and sell and deliver digitally.
Yep. And before you were at in e-commerce, you were in IT, in healthcare, right? So you have a pretty deep knowledge of integrations, right? From what I understand.
Yes, I did. I did healthcare. I worked for an EMR, electronic medical record company, for a couple of years as a technical consultant doing integrations between multiple systems. Before that, I was product manager at a startup building policy administration software for property casualty insurance companies. So I started in two very sort of highly regulated industries dealing with much larger sort of maybe slow-moving companies that were trying to adopt digital transformation. And then I went into e-commerce, where generally the tech curve was, for the most part, considerably ahead of healthcare and insurance. And it's been interesting, but it's funny because B2B e-commerce is more or less in a place where you see healthcare and insurance being today, just beginning to get into the like consumer adoption of technology as a key part of the business, instead of just like trying to pay somebody to keep a server going in a closet, right? Which is the
Yeah,
traditional way of teaching IT.
that's awesome. So yeah, quite a breadth of experience. So I know we can. I'm sure we could talk for hours on B2B e-commerce. Like you said, it's still a hot topic and growing with all the economic changes that we're dealing with from coronavirus. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure we touched on, because you have agency experience, obviously. All three of us have quite a bit of agency experience, and we've all dealt with implementing all sorts of different technologies, especially in e-commerce. So, I really wanted to get into what do you think the challenges are around implementing e-commerce technologies, mainly platforms. And let's kind of start at like a high level, and then we'll get into some of the specific bullets that we have. But what do you, so just to kind of preface that, like from our perspective, we feel like, we're crushing it with Shopify. You get up these B2C sites. It seems like such a simple process relative to B2B, where it's just like, it feels like the opposite, and it's so much harder. What do you think is what's making it so hard for these B2B companies to implement, Magento successfully, BigCommerce or Insight or whatever it is? Doesn't matter the platform,
Right, the platform doesn't matter, honestly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's two big things. I think one is the maturity of the merchant organization itself relative to digital presence, right? So B2C companies, the e-commerce revolution started in the 90s, really, and there have been a lot of brands, direct consumer brands, that have grown up digitally native. They understand SEO, they understand paid, they understand fulfillment, and there are lots of platform options that have sort of matured around that, starting with Woo, on the WordPress side, moving on to Shopify and Magento and BigCommerce and many others. And so I think organizationally, if you talk to a company that is selling direct to consumers, they've been doing it for a while, or they are staffed with people who've been doing it for a while. And they are, if not e-commerce pure play, e-com is one of the two pillars upon which their business is built. They have no other channels. They're not picking up the phone and calling customers to get new customers. They're advertising and they're delivering online. And so for B2B companies, a lot of times they're behind that curve. And this has been talked about. I think we've probably both heard a lot of the same thought leadership over the years of B2B being 10 years behind B2C in terms of technology adoption. So I think that's one of the reasons why in B2B it's so hard, is it's because the expectation for what the technology can deliver in the boardroom when they're making the decision to go digital is they want a B2C experience, but internally their product data, their operations, how they conceive of their pricing, how they manage their customer data, none of that is actually ready to support a B2C experience. And so the two pressures that you see are, internally, they still aren't thinking a lot of times of e-commerce as key to their business as a B2C company is, because it's a 0 to 5% part of their revenue, if that, right?
Yeah, maybe 10%.
B2C companies, at B2C companies, it's considerably higher. And so the institutional focus isn't there. And then the groundwork internally for like, are there people empowered to make decisions about the future of the e-commerce channel, directly empowered to do that, or is it decision by committee inside of the larger B2B organization? And a lot of times it's decision by committee, and there's not like a single stakeholder with a vision that's executing on a vision. And those two things tend to slow down the process.
Yeah, and would you say it's fair to say that, so just to add to that B2B e-commerce, you have more organizational, operational complexity, because you're not just like typically it's not always as simple as just add to cart, this is the price and that's it. They might have special pricing or whatever it is. So there's more complexity, operational complexity, more data. So more complexity and less internal sophistication like those are two bad things to have for getting up and running.
Yep.
You see where I'm going with that? Like,
absolutely. I totally agree. I really see it on the pricing side. If I had to pick one place where I see the complexity really show up in B2B, it's, there are a lot of companies that have been successfully selling for decades, family-owned distributors, small manufacturers, and the like. And the pricing strategy has been you send the sales reps forth into the world with Excel and sample books, and they figure out pricing, and they write it down on a piece of paper or they remember it, and then it's not standardized, it's not digitized, and it's all in people's heads. You accrue that over decades of time, and you end up with a real ball of yarn when it comes to trying to figure out how much any particular person who's buying from you should be paying for the parts they're buying for you, and translating all of that into a computer system which relies on standardization and relies on rules and formulas to calculate things can be tricky a lot of times.
Well, Aaron, one of the things that comes to mind, and you just really underlined it, is that a lot of businesses in B2C, they went through a disintermediation process. I mean, this is what B school people talk about all the time, right? That was really what the disruption was. So, you go direct to a consumer, the whole idea. B2B didn't really do that, right? And that's part of the reason that everything is, quote unquote, behind B2C. But also there's a lot more, of these layers in B2B than there are in traditional B2C businesses. I mean, so, I've used examples in other episodes of ours, but, just a project that comes to mind is exactly what you were describing. It's like moving from catalogs and spreadsheets or faxes or whatever people were doing to allowing a customer to go directly to a site to place an order in some sort of way, to construct it online. And that's been a leap for a lot of companies.
Absolutely.
So let's get into some of the specifics to try and kind of help people out and think through this. And we talked before this, that we had a little bit of time. So I think, there's a lot that we could get into, but I like to give it, I think it's easier for people to understand it this way because not everyone has unlimited money, right? That's always the big constraint. If you had, you give me $5 million and I'll go hire the best people. But most of these B2B organizations don't have $5 million to build an e-commerce website, right? So typically these are some of the budgets that we see, and I think they're probably pretty relevant to what you see too. There's that smaller, they're just trying to get up to something, and it's that 0 to 100K budget. Obviously 0 doesn't work, but
no.
call it 50 to 100K. Not a huge budget, although it's funny because companies will get sticker shock when they haven't seen a quote from an e-commerce, B2B e-commerce quote before.
Yeah.
They don't realize that that's the low spectrum, but really I would consider that the low spectrum of the B2B e-commerce investment is that 0 to 100K budget. So, you have some guy, whether it's the director of IT or just whoever it is, he's going out talking to agencies, and the owner said, we got to get this done for like 100K or 80K. What is kind of the guidance, or what would you kind of advocate for that company to do, whether it's platform selection, pre-development, how would you kind of approach that? We'll get into some of the other budgets.
Yeah. Well, it's going to depend a lot on, and and everybody hates I ask you a clear question and you come back with, well, it depends. So I'm going to answer with, well, it depends, right? Because a lot of times, if you, and I've had a lot of conversations over the years where somebody came to me with that budget and that need, and I start with, okay, where is your product data? Do you have it? Do you have product data? No. No, not in a digital format, right? There is a lot of times it's like, well, my manufacturers give me a spreadsheet which has a part number, up to 36 characters, because that's all the AS400 could support for the product name, and like a price, and that's it. And I say, well, great. That's not really enough to build the website on. You need descriptions, you need images, you need to understand your cost of goods, you need to understand your margins, you need to be able to develop pricing levels and tiers and things like that. there's some, if somebody already has all that, then we'll just glide right over it. But you have to start from the fundamentals a lot of times, especially for companies that have never done it before, where all their product data may be in InDesign files because they're a catalog business. So they don't have like a spreadsheet of discrete data representing any of this thing. It's literally all in graphics files.
Yeah.
That's how their channel delivers that information today. And so I would say maybe start with an audit of like, I can tell you what you need, for your, let's say $50,000 to $100,000 budget. The zero, not so much.
Yeah.
Start with a little bit of consulting or auditing around like, what do you have and what do you hope to achieve? One of the things I've often recommended to people who have a limited budget and they're really trying to do a proof of concept, right? A lot of times you'll talk to like somebody that's like, hey, it's a family business, and like, hey, dad told me to go figure out what e-commerce is going to be like. Pops doesn't want to spend that much money on it. I don't know what should I do? Sometimes the best thing to do is to start small. Pick a particular brand or a particular line of goods that you sell, or a particular sub-brand, or something that you have where you're not trying to get all 3 million of your widgets that you sell on one catalog all at once. That's a daunting task for anybody. But maybe pick a growing segment of your business, a high volume segment of your business with a reasonably small catalog and some fairly set price levels that may lend itself well to being sold online. A lot of times in B2B, especially in established B2B incumbent, it may be a sort of a house of brands approach where there's a lot of like different properties that have sort of grown up by acquisition or organically over the years. Pick one, start with one, let that be a foundation for you to learn what it's like to build an e-com site and then live in an e-com site, and then slowly roll the other brands and other pieces of your catalog into it over time. That's a great place to start, I think, for somebody with a limited budget. Don't try to do too much at once.
I love that approach. So would you say it's fair to say that 0 to 100K, especially if you don't have I think there's a difference if they already have like something robust and then maybe they're trying to make it better. Assuming they have something kind of old and they're really just trying to get up and running for the first time, or essentially the first time. So it's fair to say that it's almost like a proof of concept foundational project with a platform that you think is going to scale for them, whether that's BigCommerce or whatever it is. And it's almost like focus on getting your product data into the platform, and that's it. Like get your product data into the platform, maybe have a little bit of other B2B nuances around that, but like don't try and go too crazy with all the flashy design and other things that are just going to blow up the budget.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I like the process I like to walk people through is, let's all sit down in a room. And if I'm working one-on-one, if you're a merchant who's looking to go B2B and we're sitting down and we're talking about a project scope, I will sit down and I will say, talk to me about how does a customer or a browser become a customer who becomes an order, right? Walk me through the process of like, I find the part that I need to do the discovery. How is somebody today going to find the thing that they need? How are they going to transact that? How are they paying for it? And how are you going to ship it and fulfill it? Let's walk through that. It's like the Schoolhouse Rock. How does a bill become law, right? If you go through how does a product become an order? How does a browser become a customer? And let's focus on a path, a glide path, and really drill into all of the things that make that happen. And you map that out on a timeline or on a sheet of paper, and you look, okay, you need this data, you need this integration, you need this person pulling this lever internally. Let's talk about shipping, let's talk about fulfillment, let's talk about CRM. Like, walk through that process and let that drive the scope, right? Drop the notions that you might have around like, I'm paying for a website to be built and it will have pictures on it of my products and people will buy it and I'm going to give you money for it and that's it. You need to think a little deeper than that because you're building a channel, not a website. It's a channel, not a website. I can't emphasize that enough. And there's going to be internal change with the company as a result of building a channel. I think people need to be prepared to accept that. And usually when you go through the exercise of saying, okay, let's go through the life cycle of how a product becomes an order, how the customer fits into all of that. The lights start to go on, the switches start to flip around like, oh, okay, like, maybe we're used to shipping entire pallets. Maybe we need to, if we're going to give people the ability to buy less than a full pallet, maybe we need to think about our shipping lines. Maybe we need to think about sales tax liability in other states, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff that comes into it suddenly when you start thinking about how to move online.
That's quite a mouthful and a lot to think about, but it's safe to say that they're probably not going to get all of that operational excellence, in some amazing, consumer experience for that 0 to 100K budget, right? Like all those integrations, I guess is you're probably going to have to pick and choose some of the areas that you focus on, whether it's product data or maybe some of the order workflow to tie into the ERP, and even that can get pretty expensive unless you find like a really good product that has kind of already done it for you. But
you said the magic acronym, which is ERP too, which is a whole separate conversation.
Yeah. Let's hold on to that. So I think, because we could spend so much time on this, it's safe to say that 0 to 100K is kind of like foundational. You're not going to get everything, but you'll get some infrastructure, probably really focused around product data. And then you can kind of add to it and build in more things on top of that over time. And then let's say you get to the 100 to 200, 250K, a little bit larger budget. Maybe you can get a deeper ERP integration, more of a complete B2B experience. Well, I guess, how does that change things for you when someone kind of comes to you and they're like, I have 200K, it's a little bit more of a beefy budget.
I think, when I have that conversation, it signals to me by the time somebody is willing to allocate a budget at that level that they already kind of know what they're doing with it, right? Nobody who's new to, or very few companies who are new to transactional B2B come to you with that kind of budget. Usually when somebody shows up with that, it means that there have been internal hires and processes made already to support the technology, right? So, I would say before somebody comes to me with a budget like that, I would say, hey, do you have a director of e-commerce, or do you have somebody whose primary goal it is to drive revenue and collect customer data and do remarketing and all the rest of it around this online channel? Because if you kind of walk into it and you're like, I'm going to spend $250,000, but nobody's going to watch it internally. Nobody knows how to log into the back end and pull an order out. Nobody knows how to log in and change product data.
Which I bet happens all the time.
It does happen all the time. And so, I would say before, I love taking companies' money. Absolutely. I'm in business, right? Like I need, the people with budgets are what enable us to operate. We're consultants and technologists. But I always try to be really honest with people, make sure that they are internally staffed and organized to get ROI from $200,000+ of business. I've cleared my throat now, extensively before I answer your question. And what I would say is, when you have that kind of budget, I think you're absolutely right about a deeper ERP integration. It's the thing that everybody wants. Usually at that level, there may be multiple systems involved. There may be an ERP, there may be a CRM, there might be a separate order management or a fulfillment or a pick, pack, and ship system. There may be an accounting system outside of the ERP. Rarely, but sometimes that happens. At that level, I start talking to people about their middleware strategy a little bit, their internal ETL and reporting tools, because if you're at a level where you're driving millions of dollars through a B2B channel, you probably need to get pretty decent metrics off of things. And sometimes it can be a pain to pull that data out of lots of disparate systems, especially if they don't talk to each other. And so, you're exporting data from one spreadsheet and I'm putting data in another spreadsheet over here. And I'm trying to figure out what's our margin on particular segments. And it can be hard to pull together sometimes. I would say look at, that's when I start talking to people about, okay, if you've got that kind of budget, there's more than one system in the mix. Let's look real hard at the integration side of things for you to make sure you have the reporting tools you need to make decisions about your business, and just to make sure that manual data entry is being eliminated wherever you possibly can, right? Because that slows things down. There's payroll cost and it's an error-ridden process to do double entry from one system to another. So I say
absolutely.
First place I would start looking from a technology standpoint. that's also the level at which I might, start suggesting that people move from like the free version of Magento to the paid version of Magento,
Yeah,
or
they start to look
from
into
a
larger
free
license
platform to a
costs.
paid platform.
Yep.
Hmm?
They start to look into larger license costs, BigCommerce Enterprise or Magento Enterprise,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
that they might be looking at Insight or probably not Hybris at this point, but they might, they're looking at
No,
some
not that budget. Not for
so
that budget.
No.
because there's some other stuff we want to get into, and we could probably spend the whole time just talking about project budgets. And then so once you start to get into the 250K plus, then I think you start to get into that more sophistication. And I don't even know if we need to spend a lot of time on that, because I think, to your point, they're probably a little bit more sophisticated. But what happens, and this, we've seen this, but like sometimes they might have that, but they aren't sophisticated. They might say, oh, we can afford the 300K, we can afford 400K, but what if they don't have that internal, what do you usually, have you seen that? Because we've seen that a few times. They're like,
I have.
it's like,
I
great
have.
that you have 350K, but like, who's going to run this site? Who's going to run this project? You kind of like know it's going to fail. And like you said, it's great to take money, but it's also not great to take money that fails, because that kind of backfires too, right? So
yeah.
So
I don't know, and I don't know too much. Obviously, we've talked many times over the years. For me, I want long-term relationships with my customers.
Oh, absolutely.
There's the initial site build, but then there's the long-term relationship. The ongoing support and maintenance and consulting, marketing services, adding new features and
that's the fun part, right? Everyone wants to get part. Yeah, that's what you want to get to. The projects are the painful part, right? You want to get to the fun part, but so most some of the companies 250K plus might be sophisticated. They might have thought through the platforms. They selected an agent. They're like pretty sophisticated, and they might be doing well. But let's talk about the ones that they do have the bigger budget, but like, would you recommend they hire someone, or what would you? Yeah.
Yes, I would absolutely. And this goes back to the when you're going to, if you're really serious, if a company is really serious about e-commerce as a channel for them, there needs to be at least one empowered stakeholder internally who can make decisions about budget, ROI, and scope relative to any kind of IT project, or anything about the channel needs to be their job. It shouldn't be the part-time job of the marketing director if you're going to spend that kind of money. It shouldn't be the part-time job of the IT director to manage e-commerce if you're going to spend that kind of money. There needs to be somebody who is being held accountable to the upper leadership of the business, the board of directors, or the owner, or the shareholders, who are there saying, hey, this is the growth we want to see. This is the budget we're going to give you. Let's talk through the financial performance of the e-commerce channel for them, and then they need to be empowered to go make decisions to hit those KPIs. But if it's a part-time job or a decision by committee, it really slows down the ability for a company to learn from mistakes, or to make decisions that are necessary about vendor relationships, about merchandising, about price strategy. Sales, you have to have sales buy-in. Before you spend that kind of money, your director of sales, your VP of sales needs to be on board with this, and your reps need to not see the website as a challenge.
Yeah, as a threat. It has to be aligned. Yeah, they don't want to feel like, oh, it's my job to this e-commerce site that automates all the orders. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that they if they're not sophisticated, and it's not like there's those projects where they know what they're doing, they come to you, and it's kind of more of an RFP process, and you just hope that you win it because you know that it's going to succeed. But the ones that have that bigger budget, would you recommend it's like a director of e-commerce? Is that the title that you think?
That's often the case, or something like that. It's interesting, right? You'll see, I don't know about you, I'm curious to hear your answer on this. I feel like a lot of people's first e-commerce experience is, well, we'll do FBA. Like we'll pack a truck and we'll roll it to an Amazon warehouse and sell to Amazon. And look, we're doing e-commerce now because people can buy our stuff on Amazon. And that's not the same thing as
I think that brings up such a good point, and we've seen this where they don't realize that all e-commerce directors aren't created equal. and they go and hire someone who has e-commerce experience, but really his experience is, shipping product to Amazon and then, loading products on Amazon, something really basic. And now he needs to manage this super complicated $250,000, $350,000, whatever it is, $400,000 project where he's got to upload product data. And like, it's so much more complicated with how you structure the data. It's almost like you're using PIM data. Like you're basically running a PIM in these e-commerce systems.
Yeah.
And it's like, so that person really needs to be experienced and well thought out when you hire that person. But I think we're on the same page that they need that. It can't just be some guy that's done Amazon FBA.
Yeah, and I want to jump in on one thing Aaron said
Sure.
a little bit earlier. I mean, one of the things you said that really struck me that's, I think, high value is that, it's always the long-term relationship. So if the budget is 50,000, 100,000, or 250 or 400, it's still a relationship, and everything has a life, right? So you can recommend whatever changes or upgrades or replatformings or whatever needs to happen, but those things all have a life. Is this really something? You have a process of ongoing innovation in your company. I mean, how do you determine when you need to make the next set of changes? And if they don't initially have a person coming in who's a director or somehow a head of e-commerce, there's got to be that relationship in place so that there's a regular review and a regular understanding that they're still ahead, or they're with the competition, or they're falling behind, right? Because of changes that they haven't made. And, I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been the guy on the outside, making recommendations, and then I've moved in-house for some of those same companies to be the head of e-commerce and to kind of ride it through for a while to make sure that the team got built and all of the things you said, that there was buy-in, Isaiah, right? There needs to be buy-in across the business about the value, and you need to work with all the analytics and, finance people, make sure they clearly see the metrics too, because if it's new, they won't know all of those metrics unless there's a key player who's saying, here's how you judge the success or failure of this, and wow, that $200,000 investment's brought you $800,000 or whatever.
Yeah. Internal cheerleading. Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Tim, can you get into that a little bit more? I think we can move on from the budgets. I just wanted to try and give some people guidance on at least roughly what they should do if they.
You gotta know it. I mean, part of my line of work today is talking with a lot of startups where they're starting at square one, and it could be any budget, right? It's not zero. We're making a lot of jokes about that. It's never zero, but they have a wide range, and you have to figure out what is on that list. What are they going to be able to accomplish? What are the critical needs? But what I was really interested in hearing your views on, Aaron, are really what makes a successful B2B e-commerce player versus one that's not quite as successful. So let's just kind of come at it from that angle. So let's say I've got this B2B business, but what really would make me the most successful I can be? Like, what are the critical factors there that would make me a success?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like we've touched on a lot of it.
We have.
I mean, I go back to focus a lot. I think it's got to be. You have to really want it to be successful, which means you have to manage to it. You get the outcomes you manage to, right? Yeah. So if the outcome you manage to is purely budget from an expenditure standpoint, if you say the project was successful, or the e-commerce channel is a successful channel as long as we spend no more than $100,000 building a site.
Yeah.
Done. That's a metric. I guess it's better than no metric, but it's probably not the metric that was discussed in the boardroom when the investment was approved.
Yeah.
Right. So what is it then? Like, what are you trying to do? Success comes from focus and discipline, right? And so understanding what you're measuring, what the metrics are, and then managing to those across the business makes a successful anything. It's not limited to e-com. These are the things that make a successful business. If you can build a repeatable process that makes money, have a business. If you have a repeatable process that does not make money, you have a hobby. Figure out which one of the two you have.
Yeah. That's great. That's a perfect answer, actually. But if you don't have if you're not making money, it's a hobby. And there are unfortunately a lot of people who have hobbies who think that they have businesses. So, one thing I would just add to this too is really, I think what we had said early on too about B2B businesses being behind B2C, and there are a whole bunch of reasons behind that. But really, I think that that's something that anyone going into B2B now, like if this is something that's new for them, they're going to have to really understand that there was a long history here, and it may actually be. There are a lot of people who think it's easier, in fact, to start a B2B business today than it is to start a B2C, because the competition is so strong and there are so many people in B2C. But there's still a lot of areas in B2B where people really haven't quite caught up with the innovation, and it's not that groundswell of people starting different plays there. So there's room in B2B e-commerce, I think, to just start in a good place and just go.
Absolutely. And it's funny you said that, and for whatever reason, the thing that came to mind was over the last 6 years, how many people have come to me and said, I want to build a marketplace. I smile like,
they never get done. They're like, I'm 50 grand, build me Amazon.
Amazon. That's a little money.
I want to be the eBay of automotive afterparts or healthcare equipment or something like that.
Oh man.
All right, you've made my day.
I have no money and have no customers, but I really want a marketplace because
it's like just get a basic site up first, and then we'll talk about a marketplace.
That's good. That's good. So one last quick question. It's a quick one, just a 1, 2, 3. Do you have a top favorite non-client B2B e-commerce player? I'm just curious if there's somebody you really love who's doing everything
we think
right.
is successful.
Somebody's wildly successful. Yeah, I mean, really.
I mean, I feel like the obvious case study answer is Grainger, right? I mean, they get, they clearly are doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
They've grown enormously. That division has grown enormously, but I would say that they are clearly doing it right.
Yeah, we're fans of Supply House too, if you know those guys. I think that they've done a lot of things very, very well over the years.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the problem, I think that just to touch on that is, I think Grainger has the budget to kind of like push the envelope and the sophistication. Sure. I think someone
$90 billion.
I think that someone told me that their first e-commerce project was $6 million. That was just the first. They probably spent way more than that now. So I think, what we're trying to figure out is how do all the people that don't have $6 million, how do they bridge that gap, But so going into the next question, where do you see the future of B2B e-commerce going? Like where, especially for some of these smaller mid-sized guys, I think the Graingers can push the envelope a little bit, but assuming you're not Grainger, $6 million, where do you see, whether it's platforms getting better and easier for these companies to implement, or better data, sophistication, or where do you kind of see that? Let's say the next 3 to 5 years. I think anything beyond that is kind of a guess.
Yep. I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of M&A in the sort of the mid-sized manufacturing and distribution side. The profile for a lot of companies that I've talked to is a family-owned regional player, has carved out a niche organically over the last few decades. And the original founding leadership, it has retired or is retiring, and now we're on to like maybe the third generation, who are less invested in the business, or where they're just, they're having a problem enforcing MAP, right? Or the sales team is retiring, the channels have evolved beyond the business's ability to keep up. They have a lot of valuable collateral. They have a lot of good, supplier relationships. They have good long-term customer relationships, but they're managing decline, right? There are a lot of businesses that are today in the B2B space in managed decline. And I think you're going to see some M&A activity, continued M&A activity around that. around that space. But you will also see on the flip side of that an enormous amount of investment in digital transformation there, because there is clearly opportunity. Not everybody wants or can just buy their stuff from Amazon. I mean, that's not the right answer for a lot of companies. And so, there's going to be more consolidation. And I think you're going to see the platform, and we see this today, right? When Magento came out with 2.2 with their whole big B2B suite, that was a big
people barely even realize. I find that a lot of companies don't even really know what it can do still.
Yeah.
Like a lot of companies still don't even know that this thing even exists.
Right.
So they shouldn't have called it 2.2. It makes it sound like it's just a minor, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it was a major overhaul of the B2B functionality.
It really was. You've got platforms like Oro, right? The original founders of Magento starting Oro, which has been
there's a little beef there, I think.
What's that?
So there's a little beef there, I think, between Magento.
Maybe a small amount, minor beef, a junior whopper. So, yeah. You see the SaaS platforms picking up the game. Shopify has really run at, and BigCommerce both have, I think, run at that, the B2B space, because everybody sees the opportunity. So I think it's easier now than it ever has been. If you're new to B2B e-commerce, it's easier than it ever has been to get online and do it. The technical barriers that were present, 2 or 3 years ago aren't there anymore. You don't have to do a big bespoke software project in order to have like customer specific pricing, a request for quote process, like quantity based tier pricing, even ACH and wire transfers online or something that you can now do in a regular e-com cart perspective. There's a lot, tax certificate management. I mean, there's so many things that are now digitally available to you where you would have had to have, a few years ago, built your own. You don't need to do that anymore. And so I think we'll see more and more companies being able to build those foundations and take those first steps into e-commerce, because the ask is not as large to get at and build that foundation that we were talking about before. So I think we're going to keep seeing that over the next few years. But I also think we'll see big fish swallowing smaller fish, and more sophistication maybe around the digital transformation. And one of the things I have really been interested in is B2B digital marketing, which has been a weird dark art for a lot of people for a long time, because
I totally agree.
Everybody understands B2C digital marketing. We're going to do cart abandonment. We're going to write content for organic SEO. We're going to do paid search ads on some keywords. What does that look like when you have to have an account with us to buy from us? What is organic SEO? Are you selling something that somebody else sells? Do you have brand identity and equity that you can leverage? Like, what is your go-to-market strategy, and how do you drive new customers? Like I said earlier, there's a lot of people managing that little black book that their sales force has developed over decades. But how do you go out and acquire new customers, right? Just the old pick up the phone and start cold calling thing isn't necessarily the way of the future. So what are you going to do to replace
cold calling? No cold calling.
Yeah, that's and Tim, I think that kind of gets into a little bit of what you wanted to get into. Trying to make sure. I know we're going to run out of time on these topics, so
we'll be good. We'll be good. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that, and this does connect a little bit to something that's of interest to me. I mean, I think that a lot of the successes and a lot of the innovation, or whatever word you want to put there, in B2B lately has tried to mimic success in B2C. A lot of things, and some of those things have worked. I mean, there's no question about that. You can take some certain shopping cart solutions and product solutions and what have you, and just kind of port them over and say, okay, let's try this for B2B. But what's interesting to me too is really how you kind of figure that out, right? So you're looking at any of these things that happen in B2C, these innovations. If you were again coming at this relatively cold, not from an expert perspective, but looking at B2C, what can B2B learn from B2C still? So what can B2B learn from B2C?
I think product discoverability is is really the first step of
Mhm.
that to me, which
Mhm.
is being able to like quickly find the thing you're looking for. And it's interesting too in B2B, I think sometimes I would almost flip that on its head a little bit and
Sure.
say that sometimes a B2C experience isn't the right one for B2B. And you see, well, your sponsor today, Punch Out to Go, right? You know, Punch Out
Mhm.
is a very different experience in certain respects from
Sure.
the normal. I'm going to throw up a website, people are going to find products and buy online. You know, it's a different, you know, um, it's a totally different discovery experience. But there's also just what B2B can learn is, I think, having product data organized in such a way that it's easy to find the thing you're looking for. Filtered navigation or layered navigation is a great example of that. The idea of having attributes or pieces of data that constitute things about your products that people will want to filter on to drill into the list of matching products they need. That design pattern has been around in B2C for a really long time. It's one of the reasons that Magento was so popular back in the day, was because
Sure.
that was new. Like
They did a really good job
up.
with it. It's very, very robust, and it
Mhm.
still is
Yes.
today. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think one of the problems that we see with B2B is that they come to us and they have this huge catalog, and then they have like 8 nested categories, and I'm like, no one wants to like click, like, first of all, you can't build a menu with 8 levels of categories. Really, like 3 or 4 is the max you could probably get to on like, like with a full like mega menu. And then really after that, they should be filtering. I think even Amazon has kind of mastered that. There might be another level of drill down within categories, but I think what we're seeing is a lot of these companies need to transition their bottom level nested categories to attributes to filter.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen that, and that's like a transformation project that it's just a little nuance of like, that could be kind of a lot of work, and kind of goes back to the budget, where it's like, oh, they think they have the budget, but really like that little mini piece of the project,
Yep.
kind of a pain in itself.
Well, and that connects to organic SEO. You know, if they're a company where they need landing pages around specific facets, you know, knowing what should be a top level category and what should be a filter, there's a lot of SEO ramifications for that. And so, especially if they're transitioning from some kind of online catalog site that generates a lot of traffic for them, you want to be careful about the decisions you make about that right there, as it relates to how your site is being crawled and indexed and how you're returning for results. And that's all stuff that needs to be part of a consultative process up front before you start writing code, right? This kind of stuff needs to get looked at in some depth. One of the things I was going to say too is, with some B2B companies, discoverability is obviously, you know, an issue, but sometimes you know, thinking outside the box away from B2C design patterns and talk about automatic reordering, talk about like scanning a box. I work in the back of a restaurant, and I have, you know, utensils, or I have some kind of consumable product box. If I have a scanning app on my phone, being able to scan a barcode on the box and it automatically sends the order through the e-commerce platform to process. Nobody went and searched for a thing. Nobody even like had to go Google or get on Amazon or anything. I literally took a scanned barcode, translated it into an order. That's ultimate frictionless. The person who has the need says, hey, we're getting low in the stock room on this. I'm going to take a picture with my phone, and it's going to go order on the account that I have. It's going to go order that product. There's a lot of ways in B2B where you can rely on your customers having a certain amount of technological and operational buy-in to your platform and your catalog that maybe you can leverage to make it much easier for your customers to order from you. So I think it's important to think about that as well as making a B2C experience.
That solution that you just mentioned is in play at multiple places that I'm aware of right now. I mean, it's really great. One of the companies I know that does it's highly technical, like electronic pieces and components and whatever, and all clients get an app that is, you know, only for clients, and that app has all products in it, and people can just like open the app, scan, reorder, boom, 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 it goes through the account process and it's done. That's brilliant, and I just love stuff like that. And there really isn't, as you said, much of a parallel, not much, you know, in B2C right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people have been trying to make QR codes happen for a while, but
not here. Maybe in Asia, it's much bigger there. It's just not
not
here.
quite.
Yeah. No, that's good.
So I think, I think we're actually, we might be going a little over, but that's fine because we have so much good stuff to talk about. But so what do you see as the biggest challenge as an agency? I'm just kind of curious to hear your perspective. We have kind of ours, and I have a feeling it's going to align quite a bit, but working with B2B organizations, like, when someone comes to you, do you find that it's often that you're like, oh man, we can't, are you guys kind of getting picky to the point where that this is going to be a tough opportunity? And like, what do you see as the challenges, and how do you try and kind of filter through that so you don't take on something that's going to fail as B2B, as an agency?
Yeah, I think it goes back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier. Focus and intent and ownership, right? If I'm talking to somebody and they're approaching, and it's a transformational project, right? I want to decouple like the people that have already been doing B2B for a while and they're going through an RFP process because they kind of know they're looking for technological pieces to support an existing channel. That's one profile. That I rarely have red flags there unless it's a personality issue or the budget is simply not adequate. But from really focusing on that, the people who are new, right, who are just getting into this, I would say making sure that they are the biggest challenge I have is dealing with empowered stakeholders who can make decisions and who will own the project, right? I don't want to be talking to a project manager only for somebody that's trying to do this, where the project manager is there to balance make sure that the KPI of the build stays under $100,000. That's their mandate. They don't really care about the rest of it. So that's a valuable role in any organization, but that shouldn't be the only role. And if I'm trying to have conversations with somebody and I'm just hitting like that level of engagement from their leadership group, I'll probably walk because I don't think it's going to be long-term successful. There's got to be somebody who's not afraid to roll up their sleeves, log into the back end of the e-commerce platform, dig into some data, make some decisions, answer some questions, and then escalate those concerns up to others in the organization. That willingness to collaboratively engage in a long-running transformative process, that's key. If I'm willing to bring it. I'm willing to bring that energy. I'm willing to bring all of the advice that we have from having done this many times successfully with our businesses, both on the technology side and the biz ops side. I love it. It's what keeps me going. But I've got to have that match from the other side, right? If it's not matched from the other side of the fence, then I feel like I'm just another vendor, and I don't want to be just. If you're asking me to deliver an entire new channel for you, I can't be just another vendor. Like I can't be the hosting company. I can't be the email marketing company. You need to see us as a partner. We will see you as a partner. And that's the biggest challenge is bridging that gap, getting that trust for like, we want to help you out. And if we can gain that, if I feel like we can get that sort of like that interest and intensity reciprocated on the other side, I think it will be a successful engagement.
Sure. Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So you would say that you need some kind of more senior person that's willing to kind of roll up their sleeves, be capable of logging into the system, understand the system well enough to communicate issues and talk to senior leadership or ownership or whatever it is. It can't just be some kind of low-level guy that is just doing the day-to-day and then he has no ability to raise concerns or deal with budget or anything like that. So you really need someone. Basically, it sounds like what you really need is someone, and I would agree with this, you need someone fairly senior, and maybe they're not the main day-to-day contact, like it could be that project manager that's still the day-to-day contact, but they're at least heavily involved and are capable of understanding enough, such as logging in and understanding how product works and categories work or whatever, order fulfillment and all that works in the e-commerce system so that they understand it and you're not just talking to a wall.
That's right. All of these processes, all of these projects are conversations, and there's always trade-offs, right? There's always an ROI question that should be sort of underpinning anything that gets done. You got to bring that mindset, right? Like, well, we could make the site look like wayfair.com, but is it worth it? Like, do I need that right now? that's an important, that's somebody needs to be able to answer that question and thoughtfully, I think, and we'll absolutely give our input, right, as consultants.
Yeah, I find that the companies that we've been most successful with for B2B have definitely someone pretty much at like the director level or even VP level, sometimes the owner level, that's fairly involved and really gets it at a level of like, you know, whether it's logging in or they understand the ramifications of, oh, like we can't afford the super fancy design, let's keep design simple, or they can make some of those judgment calls of where to kind of prioritize the effort and not get too out of hand with all the requirements, which I think that's the key that happens with B2B that kind of throws things off the rails. Is there's so many requirements that you could do, right? Because you have all the B2C stuff that you want, and then you have all this B2B operational complexity. And this, I mean, it could easily become millions of dollars worth of work. And if you don't have someone at a leadership level prioritizing that, so you're not spending $1 million because you probably don't have it to spend on this, you're not going to be successful because you need that prioritization and skill and ROI analysis. I think that you said it right. It's kind of that ROI analysis of where to focus.
Right.
Project.
Yep.
Yeah, and you know, ultimately, it's also just again, I think we've all said this in different ways during this this great podcast, but really, it's taking all of these things and building it into the process for the business to succeed over time. You know, it really is. It's you're coming, you're consulting on a project or a piece of a project or something, but it's got to continue and it's got to go on and it's got to keep building that business, and you got to be ready for more change.
Awesome. Well, I think we're pretty much out of time here. So I hope everyone comes back for our next episode. We have a great guest who's on the merchant side. He's in the kind of the ground floor of digital transformation on B2B e-commerce on the actual distribution business or manufacturing business. That's been his job. So we're really excited for our next guest. But before we go, Aaron, how can people get in touch with you? You obviously have a lot of great advice. So I assume, you know, you're willing to kind of, people just want to get some advice and maybe see you can help them, you know, you're willing to help. So how would they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. I'm pretty active on Twitter. So people can find me there at arent Sheehan. I also am less active, but available on LinkedIn. And of course, you can always reach me at asheehan@hammer.net, which is my work email address. And I'm happy to talk to anybody, you know, either inside the context of a sales call or totally outside. I'll leave the sales guys behind, get on the phone with you for an hour and talk about your plans, and hopefully, you know, try to share what I know. I'm more than happy to do it.
Well, if you leave the sales guys out, I'll sign right up. That's great. That's great.
Perfect. Let's talk.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
Thanks, guys.